Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new edition of the News SEO webinar. So there's still some people coming in, and I'm already seeing a lot of comments about where you're from. It may be just for the European people. It's also quite handy to know how warm it is there because it's hot.
Yep,
it's hot. Although Areej and I are doing fine. Jono, not so much.
Yep, I am a sweaty mess. Apologies in advance.
Yeah, if you think is my monitor drooling? No, it's just Jono sweating.
Ouch.
Ouch. So yeah, before everything, we start the whole thing, there's still some people coming in. Let me do some household notices. So the age-old question: yes, this webinar will be recorded, and you can watch it back, and it'll be available on this URL that I'll post in the chat right now.
Nice.
And then when you have a question, please use the ask a question functionality at the bottom, and make sure that if you want to address a question to specifically to Jono or Areej, that you mention their name. And then if you want to stay up to date about future webinars and stuff like that, you can actually register by clicking the shiny green button in the middle.
Nice.
And make sure that you're up to date there. So since it's already 2 past, we're going to get this started. We are very, very, very excited to announce today's guest speaker, which is Areej AbuAli. If I mispronounced anything, please call me out on it. And besides being a great SEO consultant, she's also the founder of Women in Tech SEO, which is a global community for women in the technical SEO field. And today she will tell us all about in-house SEO and the unique challenges faced by people working within businesses with a lot of moving parts. And she'll also help you find out how you can win the hearts and minds of the people, and especially probably bosses, so you can secure budgets and actually get things done, which is a hard thing to do most of the time when you're an SEO consultant. And then, of course, we also have Jono Alderson, who is our head of SEO, and he will talk you through all of the important updates from the SEO world. Summer has started, so but there's still a few things that are relevant this month. And summer having started, I'm glad that you both are okay still. Jono, I hope I can still say the same at the end of this webinar. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing more for me to add, really. So let's just take it away, get cracking, and have fun.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you very much. That was very nice. Right, let's see if I can attempt to share my screen. We'll do that. Yeah, so I thought we might kick off with a quick, extended introduction from you, Areej, because I think Women in Tech SEO is super important. It's grown a lot recently, right? And you're doing some awesome stuff. I think it'd be really interesting to kind of tell this story a bit. So I guess over to you for a few minutes.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really excited to be here. It is very, very hot in the UK. I do have air conditioning, so it's not as bad for me over here. But I got really excited when I saw that slide because this is from our speaker hub on the Women in Tech SEO website. So thank you for using that. Yeah, it's been a little bit over 3 years for us now, which is so exciting. There's over 5,000 global members now, which is amazing. Thank you to the pandemic somehow, but it actually made us grow a lot more because a lot of people wanted to connect to each other. But yeah, just as we said in the intro, it's a global community completely free of charge for all women who are interested in any way in technical SEO, whether they're still starting out in it or they're super advanced. And it includes all kinds of things from workshops. We also have our own annual conference. We have a mentorship program, and we have a lot of different workshops. So yeah, thank you for highlighting it. And it's like my passion project. I spend most of my weekends and evenings on it. So yeah, I love to talk about it anytime.
That's awesome. Thank you. And I guess the other thing to flag is if you want to be doing this sort of thing and you want to be speaking at conferences and kind of building a personal brand, yeah, the mentorship angles and stuff and getting involved in that is a great way to springboard those processes and cut through some of the barriers that might otherwise exist. So yeah, great work. Thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome. Okay, so let's do some news stuff. So yeah, we've got a fair bit to get through. We've got all the usual stuff, the Google News, the Microsoft News, etc., honed down to just the stuff that's important. And yes, as Tice mentioned, a recording of this will be available, so we're going to go through quite fast, but you can go back afterwards and check it all out. We also have a nice handy link for you, which has links to all of the resources and all of the news we're going to talk about today. So anything where we mention an article or a news source, you can go through and read through on your own time and learn a bit more if you're interested. Okay. Oh, and also before we dive in too far, as always, if anything we talk about today feels like it's we haven't introduced it properly, or it's a bit too advanced, or you have no idea what we're talking about, then we have some great resources at yoast/academy. It's got to be a better way of saying that, right? yoa.st, it's a bit cumbersome. But Yoast Academy, go check it out. Free learning courses, tutorials, guides, information on broad SEO, how to do the WordPress stuff, all of those things, really cool. Okay. That's the plug out the way. Let's start with some news. So as ever, let's chat through some of these. We'll explore some of the interesting stuff a bit, and then rush through to get to a place where we can talk with Areej a bit about some of the challenges of in-house SEO, and then some of your Q&A. So do ask questions along the way as we go. Feel free to use the ask a question thing, and we'll see what turns up towards the end. Cool. Okay. So I thought this was interesting. So not really an SEO thing directly, but perhaps interesting when you look at some of Google's bigger activity. So Wikimedia, which manages Wikipedia, announced an enterprise offering. This is interesting because Google are now essentially paying Wikipedia to scrape their content and information to use in the search results. And that's interesting because this is new behavior. And there's a kind of long-standing feud between SEOs and Google that's never really been resolved, where they take your content and they put it in the search results, and it's tough luck if you don't like that. You can say, don't crawl my site and don't use my content, but then you get no visitors. And there isn't really a middle ground. Either you give them everything, and potentially that compromises your business model and ability to convert that traffic, or you give them nothing and nobody visits your website. So this feels like an interesting step for them, saying, okay, maybe there is a middle ground for licensing models and them purchasing content and supporting them. I think that's a really interesting space to watch, and we'll see where that goes. Yeah, not particularly practical, but worth watching. Oh, I've lost my slide advance.
One thing to add from my end is when this news came out, everyone said about time.
Yeah. How many years have they just been building their empire on top of Wikipedia's data,
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah, about time they pay them.
Yeah, and everyone else too, maybe. Yeah, it's definitely interesting that this kind of acknowledges that there is a value to content, and maybe to all of our content as well. So, yeah, that's good. So this one's super technical and a bit nerdy, but I think it's quite a big deal that kind of went a bit unnoticed because it's quite techy. So SXG has signed exchanges, and this is a new feature that Chrome has started supporting. And there's been flavors of this around for a while, but it's only now that it's really hit the mainstream. The practical implications of this are, if I have a website and I'm in Google, before the user clicks on my search results, Google can already have preloaded my content so that it loads instantly. And historically, this was only available on mobile devices, and mostly in Android, and only available if you were running AMP, which many people aren't, has come and gone in popularity. Now this is available for pretty much anybody who can configure their server to support it. So when somebody Googles your keyword and they go to click your URL, it loads instantly. And that's obviously great for user experience. It's great for your Core Web Vitals metrics. It's great for conversion. It's a little bit of a technical nightmare to set up unless you're running Cloudflare, which we talk a lot. I happen to be wearing a Cloudflare t-shirt today. That's coincidence. But you can go into your Cloudflare account, click a button and turn this on, and suddenly your desktop site and your mobile site as well become eligible for these kind of instant results, which if you've got problems with Core Web Vitals or a slow site, this feels like a cheat to really just bypass all of that. It's super powerful. Really, really cool. What else have we got? This one's interesting. So I'm not the biggest local SEO expert, but I think it's a really interesting space because it's slightly apart from normal SEO. It works a bit differently. Map listings get quite complex. Managing your Google local business thing is like a slightly separate entity from normal SEO. This feels like a big step in them trying to merge all those worlds together. So this is a fancy new tool from Google that lets you build rich interactive maps for listing your business locations, whether you've got 1 or 10 or 100 across like a city or a country. It's a really nice kind of intuitive way to embed direction finders and local business locators and things into your website. The only problem with it is it feels very googly. It's quite hard to actually embed. Like, making this is super easy with this interface, but if you want to put it in your website, you need to be pasting huge blocks of cumbersome code, etc. I think it's worth watching this to see where it goes and what it becomes. I really like the idea of this becoming more native and kind of Google Maps-like experiences coming into people's websites. In the meantime, if you want something a bit simpler and easier, check out our Yoast local plugin that has a map embedder thing that isn't as fancy as this one, but I think this is probably still quite hard to use, but we'll keep an eye on this and see where it goes. If you're a local business, it's worth playing with. I don't know if you had any thoughts, Areej, about the kind of the local space and where it's going, or whether this is not that thrilling.
Zero thoughts. No,
Yeah.
I don't do much local SEO. I saw Claire just joined, and she's like the queen of local SEO, so I can't say anything in front of her. But no, I know that the local SEOs got very excited about this news. So yeah.
Yeah, shiny new toys for sure. That's good. Look at you drawing all the SEO celebrity crowd. That's exciting. Okay, well then let's talk about something else. Let's talk about AI. This is very trendy at the moment. So this was buried in, I guarantee nobody's ever read this, but Google has an AI blog, which they post like 5,000 word articles about some very deep, nuanced aspects of how their machine learning systems work, all very impenetrable. There was one article that stood out last week where they just said in passing, oh yeah, and we are now using this AI system to automatically caption videos based on a combination of the image content and the spoken content. They can now kind of combine those and say, now we will automatically create captions. And that's really cool, because then it's not a huge step to go beyond that and say, we will do this in all of the languages under the sun. And I know we talk about this a lot on this webinar that comes up time and time again, but video as a content format is only becoming more and more important and more valuable, and the preferred way of many audiences to research and form opinions and get quick decisions. If you're not already doing video stuff, now is probably a good time to try. It gets cheaper and easier every day that goes by. The tech gets easier, the kit gets cheaper. This is how your audience is researching. And if Google is removing even more barriers to the work that you have to put in, you don't have to write cumbersome captions, you don't have to translate it. YouTube and Google will solve all of that for you. This feels like a huge deal. Like, now is the time to be investing in that for sure.
I have one thing to add on that.
Yeah.
Just in general, I think this is really, really good that this is finally happening. But at the same time, I really hope that it doesn't mean more people become lazy when it comes to all things accessibility. Because, you know, speaking to tons of people who rely on this captioning, they need proper subtitles. When it's automated and it misses out on, you know, a lot of this is what worries me here. Like, I see a lot with podcasts, for example, where a lot of the reasoning that they put transcripts is hoping that they rank for things. But then, you know, they just use automated captions for that. And for people who are actually reading it, who need to read it, it then becomes a bit problematic. So I think that's just my only worry, that the more this stuff happens, unfortunately, the more lazy people might become about, you know, proper accessibility needs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we say the same a lot around anything that's kind of doing automatic SEO stuff, whether it's alt attributes or content or whatever. You really want a human who's an expert in that space, who cares, to like do that editorial pass for sure. Like, yeah, these are shortcuts, they're not replacements. That's dangerous. Yeah, good shout. Good shout. Do you want to talk about Search Console and new toys, right?
Yeah, I think that one was exciting. A lot of people were talking about it. I mean, I don't use a website at the moment that has much videos on it. It's an e-commerce website, but I know that the team are planning on introducing a lot more of that. So I can imagine, you know, this being really, really helpful, like actually being able to index the different videos, but also point out any, you know, errors or problems with it. So that's definitely an exciting new toy.
Yeah, and I think the kind of ongoing evolution of Google Search Console into like an actually useful tool for monitoring, managing your site is really exciting. I know it was kind of abandoned for a long time, at least it felt like it, and now we're getting lots of new features and helping us understand how sites are doing, so that's cool. A brief plug though on that, if you are looking on your Search Console report and you do have videos on your site and it says you have problems, you probably want to check out our video SEO plugin, which is designed to solve exactly those kinds of problems, like saying, hey, you should have transcripts, you should declare how long the video is, you should do 101 other little things like schema and meta tags to tick all of those boxes. So yeah, don't do all that hard work yourself. We do have a thing that does it. But yeah, it's pretty cool. This one stood out to me. So this is increasingly in the kind of product review space, Google are being very opinionated on the importance and value of authoritative expert reviews. And the general gist is, I don't want to have to, as a user in the search, I don't want to have to wade through 100 websites. I don't want to see 1,000 thin reviews. I want to get an expert curated opinion from somebody who knows what they're talking about, saying this one is the best, or this one is the cheapest, but this one is the fast. Like, I want that thinking to have been done by somebody I can trust, who we can prove that they're an expert. So that's really important if you're writing reviews on your sites, or if you're getting reviews, fine, that's been the case for a while. What's new is increasingly these critic reviews are getting exposed directly in the search results. So if I'm searching for new headphones, as a user, I'm going to see these expert opinions, and that's not going to change where you rank necessarily. It's not going to be conventional SEO, but it is going to inform or at least influence what happens next. Like, I might, if it says, oh, don't get the Bose ones, doesn't matter if Bose rank first, I'm not going to click their site. And increasingly, I really like this, because increasingly it makes SEO more about the real world thing. Like, if you're a restaurant trying to rank really high, the best thing you can do to influence people's behaviors and experiences is serve great food and provide a great experience and source local ingredients and do all the other good things that a good restaurant does, so that you get good critic reviews. And I think increasingly we're seeing a world where ranking highly and influencing searchers and getting those clicks and conversions, the SEO side isn't a separate thing that you need to do. It's very much about the inherent quality and expertise and authority that you have. So this is very much the way we need to be thinking about modern SEO. So yeah, this is a very small feature, but it's moving in a good direction. Right, definitely over to you, Areej, for talking about TikTok, because I am a fuddy old man now, and I have no idea how any of these ecosystems work.
Oh my God,
so, yeah.
I feel so old. I don't even have TikTok on my phone. My husband uses it, and he thinks it's really funny. I tried to use it one time, and I just did not understand it. But everyone's talking about TikTok at the moment. I saw so many posts from SEOs. You know, when someone posts something and then everyone else decides to, and everyone seems to be having that conversation around how it's taking over Google search and so forth. I personally do not use it, but I have spoken to some people, and I can see why, you know, the need for, specifically when it comes to recommendations, whether it's food related or product related or so forth, like being able to see if certain things are worth it via TikTok first. But I'm just as old as you are.
Damn it, we need to get somebody youthful on the next one. Yeah, no, I think we had some stats in the last one about the kind of something like 4 billion downloads of TikTok in the last couple of years or something. And like, this is increasingly how people research and make decisions, in snaps of little videos. Yeah, and it's not just the youth, unfortunately. This is increasingly a kind of normal behavior. I saw today, actually, there's a whole bunch of stuff going around about TikTok videos in Google search results. If you search for like TikTok SEO, there's a whole bunch of people going, here's how to do your meta tags and stuff. It's increasing. I should rewind. Like the thing here isn't about TikTok specifically. It's about short form social video as a new content format, and that being a quick and easy way to educate, to inform, to convince, etc. Yeah, and it's a whole new space to play in. So definitely, if you're a fuddy old person who doesn't really get it, but you are trying to influence people and get consumers and build a brand, then really, I think it's about time that you need to go and work out how all this works. I'm afraid. Sorry, I know I'm resistant, but yeah, all of us. Okay, so that's it for Google. A little bit of Microsoft news. This stood out. So I don't think this in and of itself is thrilling. There's a whole bunch of stuff where if you're running a special offer, that sort of gets exposed a little bit in your search results for their like Google Shopping equivalent. What was interesting about this was we've talked a few times about bits of this ecosystem which are relying on schema and structured data on your pages as the truth. What do I mean? Most historically, if you want to be in these kinds of spaces, the Google Shopping, the Facebook Merchant Center, et cetera, the Bing equivalent, you need to create an account and upload all your products and synchronize that with RSS feeds. And you're probably using third-party software to do that. And it's expensive and it's cumbersome and it needs managing. What's changing is that now you've got a whole bunch of schema markup and structured data on your pages, and Google and Facebook and Bing will just read that. And they will use that to say, okay, this product's gone out of stock, the price has changed, the inventory levels have changed, the availability information's been updated. And your website increasingly becomes like a database to these systems. And now Bing's saying the same thing as Google and Facebook have been for a while, which is if they crawl your site and they see there is a special offer, suddenly all of this happens automatically and it's synchronized. And whilst that does mean that users will quite often shop and just convert in search on Google, in Bing, without ever visiting your site, it does mean that you can kind of automatically populate these marketplaces. So this feels like quite a big deal. It feels like you should definitely, I have a promo for this as well. We're full of ads this week. You should be using a system that populates that automatically. And this isn't, I'm not saying that you have to use all these products and buy all these things. I'm saying if you want to increasingly compete in these marketplaces, you need the structured data and schema output that, for example, a Yoast WooCommerce or Shopify solution will provide. Other solutions exist, but hey, these ones are pretty fancy. So yeah. Areej, do you have anything to talk about around this? I think this was quite interesting.
Zero.
No. E-commerce, right?
I don't usually. It's very interesting. I'm on mat leave right now, so this for me is fascinating because I can kind of sit back and hear about the latest news. But I'm not usually up to date with Microsoft news, to be honest.
Well, there's usually so little, and it's usually, oh, look, they've sort of copied Google a bit, which again is the case here. So yeah, I don't think you're missing too much. Okay, then let's do some WordPress news instead. I think there's a little bit of this month. What have we got? Oh yeah, so the performance team, which we talk about all the time because it's freaking awesome and only about 5 years late, bless them, are doing some really cool work. And there's all sorts of stuff going on. But one of the interesting things that just popped up is it looks like we're going to get a tool for checking plugins meet certain performance standards. And we already have something like this for themes. Where they go through and check, is there code that doesn't meet certain standards? Is this inefficient? Does it tick all the right boxes, etc.? There's never really been a similar thing for plugins. And as a result, many plugins are slow. You add half a dozen plugins or so to add some functionality, and it turns out that each of those adds 10 megabytes of JavaScript and a bunch of CSS, and it does it everywhere when it shouldn't really. I really like the idea of us starting to, if not crack down on that, at least start to recognize it and start some narratives around that being a problem and start to work out how we address this. And to have that systematically at scale would be really cool. I think that could have a huge impact on WordPress's kind of core and overall performance. Will encourage developers to use better approaches where there are things that are slow. This is really, really cool. Quite nice. Okay, some social media news then, because there's all sorts happening in here. And I know that I see there's people chatting saying, how on earth do we keep up? You keep up by watching this news, obviously. So we were just talking about how big a deal TikTok is and how much it's kind of fundamentally changing search behavior and how it's taking over Google. One of the things I quite wanted to point out is that might all change tomorrow. And all of this might change tomorrow all the time. I really like that this is quite a dynamic ecosystem, but specifically, there is a whole bunch of political regulatory stuff going on in America that might result in TikTok being removed from all the stores and apps, etc., potentially Google search results as well. The background here is that if you don't know, TikTok is owned by a Chinese firm called ByteDance, which historically has had not great relationships with the US government. I think this is a really stark reminder that stuff can fundamentally change overnight. I wonder what might happen if TikTok suddenly disappeared from Google search for US citizens. Certainly that's going to impact your strategy for social media and where you build your outposts and stuff. So yes, whilst all of this is fast moving and very important and fundamentally changing how consumers behave, I wouldn't bet too hard on any one given platform. I certainly wouldn't be going all in and saying, let's stop doing SEO and start doing TikTok. Do some sensible balance of both, but remember that all of these are shifting sands. What else have we got? Oh yeah, Pinterest is doing some interesting stuff. So they took down all their developer documentation the other day, which panicked us greatly because we monitor these things ongoingly. And then they brought them back with a whole bunch of new features. Essentially, they're upgrading kind of their product pinning stuff, which if you're not familiar with the mechanics, you when you do a Pinterest, when you pin a page, if that page contains product schema and metadata, it gets exposed in quite a nice way. It makes it shoppable. It says the price. It says the special offers. It shows the video. They're adding more and more features to that. I think we're compatible with a bunch of that through our schema stuff, which is quite nice. But then there was some other interesting stuff that happened alongside this. If you saw our YoastCon presentations back in however many months ago that was, Lily Ray spoke, who's a great SEO, real wonderful expert on kind of all things authority, expertise, trust. She talked about a chap who joined Google called Bill Reddy, whose remit internally at Google was essentially to help them grow into the e-commerce space, to compete with Amazon, to take on Pinterest, to really shake up their offering. And he's been poached by Pinterest. So all of those kind of where is Google going with e-commerce to compete with Amazon dreams might well fall by the wayside. And whilst Pinterest isn't the biggest player in the space, this is a power play. I would be watching to see what they do here and making sure that you at least are aware of how your brand is reflected in Pinterest and that you're doing at least the bare minimum there, and keeping an eye on what they come up with over the next months. So yeah, Pinterest is a thing. Who knew in 2022? Waiting for that one to go away, but no. What else have we got? A few other bits of tech notes. Very briefly, the W3C, Yoast is a member of. They are the standards body that defines how things like meta tags should work and what the internet is and how HTML should be well formed. They're doing a big internal reform, which I think is a really good thing. They're now a public interest non-profit organization, which should give them a bit more clout in things like the political ecosystem. For when politicians don't understand how HTML works, they're now a little bit more able to have an authentic discourse there and discussion. It also means that it's easier to get involved and to open up and for more brands to have a say in kind of the future of the internet stuff. So that was pretty good. And then lastly, I think for our other news, before we get on to exploring some more interesting stuff, Meta, the company owns Facebook, launched a new tool, a new AI thing for essentially identifying fake news, which I thought was a fascinating pivot. So they've partnered with Wikipedia and they're doing a bunch of other stuff to say, okay, Wikipedia's content edits and system moves far too quickly for human evaluation. What if we applied some machine learning and an AI to say, does this look like an authentic edit? I just thought it was fascinating that decades of Facebook being the comprehensive source of all fake news and potentially evil in the world, now being able to pivot and say, actually, we can monetize that enormous database of really bad stuff and use it for good was quite an interesting pivot. And I wonder, like, are there other flavors of this? Like MySpace has not got good content on it. Tumblr is do not dig into Tumblr. But maybe these legacy ecosystems of which were abused, which weren't well maintained, actually become resources for a better internet. I thought that was quite a nice exploration. So yeah, whilst Facebook is not necessarily the best force for good on the planet, this is pretty cool. And this is really good. Pretty nice.
Yeah, this is so interesting. I hadn't even come across this at all, but it feels like they're trying to pivot more and more as far away from Facebook as they possibly can, right? Like this is kind of what it is, isn't it?
Yeah, as you would. I bought an Oculus Rift recently, and the whole kind of meta experience is very not Facebook. So yeah, definitely distancing themselves. Okay, very briefly, some bits of Yoast news. We've had a whole bunch of new releases. I won't bore you with the details, but there's a bunch of cool stuff around schema, around some new word complexity analysis, and there's all sorts of other new stuff coming. We are on a feature roll at the moment. Go check that out. Yeah, I don't know if we have a short URL to the changelog, but it's worth going and exploring. There's a bunch of new stuff in Yoast SEO Premium in particular that may or may not make its way to the free plugin eventually, but if you want to get it first, go and check that out. It's worth upgrading for some of the new toys before your competitors. So that was a lot. Let's do something much more fun. Let's talk about the challenges and nature and opportunities of in-house SEO. I guess just before we dive into that, just a bit of definition. If you work in an SEO agency for other clients, you are an agency SEO. If you work for a tool platform like Yoast, you are a tool vendor SEO. And then if you work in a business, in a company, amongst a team, doing other stuff, you are an in-house or client-side SEO. So yeah, kind of different types of people doing different types of jobs, different types of responsibilities. We're going to explore what that looks like. So I guess to kick off, let's look at what is an in-house SEO? What's the job? What does it involve? And how is that different to an agency? And when might it make sense to outsource that? Yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, I want to start off by saying in-house SEO is way better than agency side, but I don't want to upset anyone in the chat. I used to be agency side, so I did that for 5 years before moving on to in-house, and I cannot see myself ever going back. But in-house, you are primarily responsible, for the one website or the one company's website that you are working on. Whereas agency side, you kind of have that diverse number of clients that you're working on. Whereas in-house, you kind of hone in and you focus, on that one website that you work on. And it kind of differs from company to company. So you might either have like a full-on in-house team where you've got your tech SEO and your content SEO and your off-page digital PR side, or it might be much smaller where you have some companies where there's literally just like this one SEO person who works there, and then potentially if they need more resource, they could like outsource some of it. So yeah, it's kind of different from one company to the other.
Makes sense. I think when we were chatting yesterday, preparing this, we're saying like there are probably many Yoast users who are like small business owners or operators, and as that one person who runs the website, they're very similar to an in-house SEO, right? But you're also the CEO and the cleaner and the finances department. So where you might conventionally be fighting for budget or prioritization, you've got to do that with yourself, which is probably pretty tricky. How do you prioritize all of that?
Yeah, definitely. So for example, like where I work right now, which is Papier, when I joined, they were only 5 years old and I was their first and only SEO initially. And so, at the beginning, it kind of felt like I was their SEO consultant who they had brought in from outside to kind of help them understand everything SEO wise. Whereas previous to that, when I worked at Zoopla, it was quite a large SEO team. We were sitting within digital marketing, and it was, like your typical kind of where we had tons of resources and we were growing. We had like, 4 tech SEOs and 2 content, and we had like a whole digital PR outreach side. So it really does differ from one place to the other. I think for me, as someone, for example, who a year ago when I started and I was like the first and only in-house SEO, initially what really mattered to me was to kind of set some benchmarking in place and understand, like how do we stack up at the moment? What's our organic traffic? What's our organic revenue look like? And just have some things in place before I kind of jump into the recommendations and what needs to be done for me to then be able to use as a benchmark down the line once we actually start implementing some stuff.
That's interesting. So yeah, you spend a period of time just working out where you are before you rush into getting stuff done. Otherwise, how do you know whether you're going in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
Nice. So what does a kind of typical day look like for you as in an in-house role? What's that involve?
Yeah, so I know we might chat about this in a bit, but I personally sit in the tech team, which is very, very different from a lot of other in-house SEOs who tend to sit in the marketing team. So my schedule is very much aligned with the tech team, where we have morning stand-ups, we have 2-week sprints, we have retro at the end of the 2 weeks to kind of reflect and see how the last 2 weeks went. And so I kind of make sure that any work I do fits within that sphere so that it makes sense. So for example, if I have a ticket I want to push through, I make sure this is included within our 2-week sprint and so forth. And yeah, I think in general, it's a mishmash of when it comes to the tech side, if there's specific auditing that's been done, so ensuring that we kind of get those tickets out. There's I wouldn't say a lot of reporting, but a lot of monitoring of performance is a better word for it. So kind of seeing how, we're performing when it comes to rankings, traffic, revenue. There is reporting every now and then to like leadership team in terms of how organic is going. Working in-house e-commerce specifically means that I work a lot with like the trading or online merchandising team because, they own the website primarily. So that's the team that I tend to work with closest, to ensure that everything on site kind of ticks all of our SEO boxes.
That's cool. I remember when I started out in SEO, the idea of the SEO people being able to even talk to the merchandising and business people was so alien. So it's great to hear that that's kind of synchronized. A thought. So if you're a smallest business and you're growing and you're getting to the point where you need more hands on SEO, I know many people's kind of first reaction will be, I'll outsource some of that. I'll get an agency. God forbid, I'll go somewhere like Fiverr and spend some money. Don't. If you're thinking about it, really don't. At what point does it make sense to get an agency in for what kind of things versus maybe going, I'm going to hire my first SEO person in a business of maybe say 4 or 5 people? What do those decisions look like?
Yeah, so for example, when I worked at Zoopla, we were very strong in the tech SEO side. So it was possible for us to hire in and provide a lot of training to folks who join us. Whereas, we didn't have, from a digital PR side, we had, a small number of outreach folks, but we didn't have people or resources who could help us with research and design and dev and so forth. So, when you kind of think about it and you calculate it, it makes a lot of sense to then outsource an agency who are experts in their fields and would know, would basically come as a one-stop shop primarily, as opposed to think about building and scaling all that up internally. And we didn't have anyone anyone who would be able to sit and kind of train them and have a vision of what exactly needs to be done. So I think at that point, it kind of makes sense. I think if your team is quite small, then it's also thinking about it like project-wise, retainer-wise. Do you need someone on permanently, or do you simply need someone who can kind of fulfill some capacity for a short period of time, which can then be bringing on people for a short period of time as opposed to hiring full-time?
That makes sense. So it's almost a kind of project manager, cat herder kind of, well, rather than doing the SEO stuff explicitly.
Yeah.
Cool. What else do we have to talk about? Yeah. So I think one of the advantages of agencies, certainly I find, is that working in an agency, you touch lots of clients, you get a lot of experience, lots of different sectors that you can then apply to other challenges that you have. If you're in-house, I guess you're working on one site, probably for one brand, maybe you miss out on some of that. How do you stay up to date? How do you find new ideas? How do you stay in that space?
Yeah, that's such a good question. So I think usually when people are starting out their SEO career, I actually tend to advise them, please go agency side, because there's so much more that you will learn. Like, even though I'm not such a big fan right now, but I don't think I would have had any of my SEO knowledge if it wasn't for the time I spent agency side, because you do work with a lot of different clients, a lot of different websites, and you get a lot of that account management skills as well, which becomes very, very helpful when you're in-house. So actually speaking to clients and sharing recommendations and so forth. Once you're in-house, though, the skills that you learn become very different. So you touched on project management, for example. I think that's a very good point, but also I think it's more about product management is what I say. A lot of SEOs now, and you see that role a lot in an in-house role now, where they're called, like an SEO product manager, because that's spot on. Like, we understand our requirements very well, so we should be the ones who are able to feed those in product and tech teams. But in terms of like staying up to date with things, I would say the one disadvantage about being in-house, especially if you're one person, what tends to happen is, there's no one to brainstorm with, right? There's no one to kind of make sure, does that make sense? Should we go ahead and do this? Do you have another opinion of how to go around this? In which case, our industry, which can be helpful sometimes and sometimes not very much, but being part of a community or a network or industry can then become very, very helpful, because you can go out there and ask questions and, just sense check some things. And so I think that, that makes it really important, the importance of having a community and being within the industry and being able to ask these questions openly, and attending conferences and tuning into webinars like this and so forth.
Makes sense. Nice. You mentioned conferences. You've just got back from speaking at MozCon, haven't you? Yeah. Which is one of the biggest and brightest events in the calendar. How was that?
Yeah. That was so exciting. I went last week. This is my third MozCon. I did one in person back in 2019, and then I spoke virtually last year. But it was just as scary and nerve-wracking as ever.
Oh, yeah. I did that one a few years ago, and I was shaking behind the stage. I think
we're so rusty as well now, right? Because it's been so long since you've actually. You were so used to speaking to a screen, and then it was like, oh my God, who are all these people staring back at me?
Yeah, and no notes, right? It's really hard. Dear. Okay, so one of the questions that always comes up in these kinds of discussions is, how do you get stuff done? How do you wrangle the politics and the people? Like, the CEO has an outdated opinion about keyword density, and the IT guy won't sign off on changing the robots text. How do you manage those kind of interpersonal and political conflicts?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm in a very lucky position because I do sit in tech team, and I think that has made a massive, massive difference, where prior to that, in my other in-house role, I sat in marketing. And so I had a lot of that. I would say probably 60% of my time was spent convincing tech to prioritize something that I needed to get done. But for example, I'm having the same issue right now, but on the other side. So I'm having that issue with content and marketing because I don't sit in their team. So, good luck being able to kind of prioritize some of your stuff there. So that always happens, and it happens dependent on like what team you sit in or what you work on. But, prioritization is key when it comes to these things. It's very, very important to be able to, stand up and say, that's the priority, but also that's the effort and that's the impact behind it, because we tend to go in and say, oh, this is high, medium, low, and we stop at that. But we're purely thinking about it from an SEO perspective. We need to sit down with the teams who actually need to implement the work and understand like what's the effort from their end and how likely are they to fit it, within the next sprint or within the next quarter, and what other stuff do they have on. So something I tend to do is, for example, if the product team had like an initiative related to a specific section of the site, I would then just fit my stuff through that. So instead of coming at another time and saying, oh, I need you to focus on, I don't know, product listing pages, I would then wait until they're working specifically on that section of the site and feed my recommendations there. So kind of trying to put your stuff where it becomes part of a bigger plan, as opposed to just hoping your stuff randomly goes in and gets done.
That's cool. So you align to their objectives and what they're getting KPI'd or bonused on, and then suddenly everyone's friends. Really nice.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else we should touch on, or should we get Tice back in to do some Q&A?
Yeah, I'm happy either or. I think in general, you know, when you work in-house, I know a few people find it overwhelming because they work alone. I can see Angela's just mentioning that right now. So it tends to happen. I probably spent the first 3 months when I joined purely working on like benchmarking and processes. And so maybe a piece we can slightly talk about is just the education piece. So no one
that's
knew
huge,
much
right?
about SEO, and no one really cared much about it. So something I did, for example, was I started an SEO channel, and I just told folks if they're interested, they can join it. So we have everyone from like designers to tech folks to the CEO who have joined it. And what I tend to do is like every 2 weeks, I would share some updates. So very similar to what you've just done now. But for example, if there's an algorithm update, I would say this happened. Or if we worked on like a content initiative, I would share like what the results are. So I think some of that stuff can be more fun and more intuitive and easier to absorb than simply sending like a monthly report out that people kind of just skim through and that's it. So kind of, you know, prioritize and think about the education piece to get more people on board and more people interested. It then makes it much more easier down the line for people to have like SEO front of mind.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of those nice things that everybody goes, oh, I actually am quite interested in this, even though you kind of maybe need to de-educate them a bit on some kind of mistaken thinking. But yeah, no, that's awesome. Very cool. Okay, let's there's a whole bunch of questions in the thing. Should we get Tice back in to do a little bit of moderating and pick through? There he is. Look at that. Like summoned like a genie. Although you appear to be frozen, actually.
I'm not frozen, am I?
No, we can see you.
That's just Jono, I think.
Oh, you're there. Okay, just frozen for me. That's not good.
That's
Tice
not
is
good.
broken. All right, well, we'll do some Q&A without him. Oh, well.
Without me moving. Okay, so actually...
No, okay, so let's look through what's the most top voted questions here. We'll try and do this whilst talking and juggling through these. Oh, that's a good question from Chester, saying if there's one thing that's crucial for you to increase the SEO of your client's website when you start out, what would that be? Good question.
So I think if we kind of think about the KPIs, I don't think we should care too much about the KPIs that matter to us as SEOs, but instead kind of prioritize KPIs that matters to the business. So what I would tend to do is I would speak to different stakeholders and understand, what matters to them, what do they prioritize. At the end of the day, it's going to be the high level KPI. So something around leads or revenue or so forth. So kind of understand that and then see the organic percentage of it. Something I always like to do is understand the percentage of organic revenue out of total revenue, for example, to know how much share we have across all the different channels. Because then I can go ahead and say, when I first started out, let's say our organic share of revenue was 40%. But now that has increased to 50 or 60 or so forth. That's also something that down the line, if there's a lot of PPC spent, for example, you can then think about how to balance that out and how we can actually drop some of that spend. Like how can we balance both channels out, basically?
Nice. Apparently, Tice is not frozen for anyone except me, so I'm going to refresh and go out and in again. You guys carry on. Back in just a moment.
Will do. Okay, so we actually have another really interesting question is by Alessia Miller, who asks, what online SEO communities do you all like to help you stay up to date on SEO and to learn more?
I'm going to be super biased and talk about Women in Tech SEO. So Alicia, if you haven't joined, please join. Women in Tech SEO is awesome. And it's definitely like a super friendly, kind, judgment-free community, which you don't see a lot of. But to be honest, like other than that, Twitter is very, very helpful. I think I spend a lot of time on Twitter. I know there are also like some Reddit channels. Big SEO is one, and there's just some other like Slack communities and so forth that people can join. But definitely, if you haven't, if you're not a part of it, it's completely free. We have like a free Slack and Facebook group, so please do join us if you're a woman in SEO.
Good. Do you have any SEO communities that you're a part of, Jono? Yes, you do.
Twitter,
But do you like to share any?
Yeah, I thought Twitter's great. Like, there's some lazy trolling on there that I may or may not be part of occasionally, but actually as an education space, it's really good. Like, there are so many moving parts of SEO, and even the definition of what SEO is and isn't changes so often. Yeah, Twitter's really handy for kind of seeing what's happening and being in the moment and discussing unknowns. Like, none of us understand how any of this works, truly. We have reasonable kind of guesstimations, but yeah.
Yeah. Very clear. Okay. And then we have a question by Liz, who says, I handle all marketing for my company and so much to do. Tell me where SEO ranks on importance.
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I mean, I do not envy you for your job. I think going back to what we just said now in terms of understanding, the share compared to all the different channels. So for example, if organic or if SEO brings in like 70% of traffic or 70% of revenue, then that's probably something to really focus on. Whereas if it's a very, very small channel at the moment, only bringing in like 10%, whereas let's say email brings in, I don't know, 30 or 40. So it's kind of, understanding that data, understanding those numbers and understanding what the channel split is and what you can focus on, but also from a resource perspective and a budget perspective, like, do you even have the budget to go ahead and spend a lot of things on paid? If not, then you're going to have to rely more on organic. If a lot of your problems are like content-wise, so you need to focus a lot on like building a lot of content. Do you have the resource to have more content writers on board? So it's a balance of the current state, the benchmark of where you're at, your resources, what impact they potentially have, and just being able to kind of juggle between those. But that's a very difficult job to have. I'm happy to only manage one channel.
And I guess then there's also the consideration of what's the potential? Like, if you've got competitors who are doing phenomenally well and there's loads of people searching and you know that there is a big slice of pie to be had, then maybe you chase that. But then you get the next challenge, which is the short term versus the long term, right? A lot of your SEO stuff is going to be quite a long game, and you're going to have to invest over time to build up that curve very slowly. Whereas you might take that budget and those limited resources and go, tomorrow I'm going to spend a whole bunch of money on AdWords and paid ads because I know that will deliver return immediately. And how do you balance those short term versus long term strategies? Yeah, I'll do chat a favor and say it depends. To get that out of the way.
Got it. Very clear again. So let me see. Well, let's. There was some discussion about TikTok, and so someone asked. I recently read something. Well, this was just before the TikTok slide came in, actually. So. I know you both don't really like it, but I'm still going to ask the question. What's your thoughts on TikTok for SEO as opposed to Google?
I think we're going to start seeing TikTok for SEO courses coming out very soon.
Yep.
I'm waiting to see who's going to be the first one to do that. I do think it's going to be a big deal, to be honest. Like, even if we're very old and we don't understand it, that's kind of our problem, because it means we're going to be very behind. But the fact that, as data says, I don't know, over 40% use that before Google search now is quite problematic. But I mean, when it comes to e-commerce, for example, I hear a lot of these numbers related to Amazon, where a lot of people say 40% of product search starts on Amazon before Google, right? But it doesn't. People aren't that worried about it, and they're still going ahead and optimizing as much as possible on Google. So I wonder whether the TikTok thing is going to be like another Amazon way of kind of searching for stuff. I don't know, Jono, if you have anything to add to that.
Just the kind of broader stuff, which I know we've talked about a bit on this before.
Oh, we lost. You were muted.
You muted me. I didn't do that. That was you.
I did not.
I think there will always be a strategic trade-off between I have my domain and my website, and I'm building a marketing list and an email list with permissions, and I'm growing my equity on my domain and doing well in SEO, and that's growing over time, versus a whole bunch of people are in different ecosystems, whether it's Amazon or TikTok or Alexa or whatever, are researching and making decisions. So you've also got to be there, and you need some kind of hub and spoke strategy where you have your central, this is where I live, but then you've got outposts in these environments so that you at least have a presence and you're able to influence consumers as they're there. I think the Amazon stuff's quite interesting because it's a different type of search behavior. Like, these are people who know that they want a replacement light bulb for that one. And that's not going to Google and searching, how do I increase the brightness in my office? The kind of research behavior is different, so they don't necessarily cannibalize each other. But I think we'll see similar stuff with TikTok, where I'm not going there looking for a product or a service. I'm going there for fun, for inspiration, for ideas, different type of audience, different type of content.
Yep. Couldn't agree more, as usual. And then there's another question. I think this was yesterday earlier as well, who wanted to ask about the one thing. But if there's one thing that is detrimental or negative on the SEO of your website that you have experienced before, what is it?
I mean, here's the interesting thing. There is always going to be one thing, and that's probably what I spend most of my time, that first 3 months when I start working on a new website, figuring out, right? Because I can't specifically tell you what the one thing will be for your specific site, but I know, for example, for an aggregator website I was working on before, the one thing was the fact that there were far too many index pages that all looked exactly the same. So the one thing that we needed to do is no index a huge chunk of them. So that was their one thing. Whereas, for example, on another website, the one thing could be there's barely any content. There needs to be a lot of content. So we need to focus all of our time and effort and attention on building more content. So, my advice would be, I can't tell you what whoever the person asked, one thing is, but this is what you need to define, because time and time again, we do the mistake of going ahead and saying, here's 20 things you need to do, or here's 30 things you need to do. But in reality, there is one thing that actually really matters more than any of the others that we should probably put all our effort on before then putting all the best practice in place. That would kind of be my advice.
I'll echo that and add that once you've done that one thing, there'll be another one thing and another one thing and 1,000 another one things. And you need to do one of those every day until you die, because your competitors are probably doing 2 of them a day and the landscape's changing. That's how SEO works. There is never one thing that you do and you've finished and you've fixed it. Like, you've got to keep iterating. And I think then maybe the one overarching thing is look at every page and every pixel and every word and see where you can get the best returns from improving those, because they're never going to be perfect and they're never going to be finished. So yeah, sorry.
Yeah. And one thing until you die, I hope that's of old age, right? Not of,
Yeah, hopefully. Happily, as a very rich and successful person with a very optimized website.
Exactly. Just making sure. Okay. Hannah has an interesting question. She says, can you please explain the no follow attribute for links?
Okay, that's super specific. So I think which is really good. I love specific questions. So no follow is basically telling Googlebot or telling bots to not crawl or not give any authority to crawling the following page. So let's say on a specific page, if we're talking e-commerce, for example, we add a no follow on certain type of filters as an example. What we're basically saying is, as a user, as a human, I will be able to go through and see what comes next. But we're telling Google to please not give any authority to going ahead and crawling those pages. Is that a good way of explaining it, Jono?
Yeah, definitely. And I think historically where this made a lot of sense was things like, in fact, why it was introduced was blog spam. That if I've got a bunch of comments on my blog from people saying, hey, check out my awesome shadyinsuranceWebsite.com, you as a brand don't want to endorse that. You don't want to be accidentally saying to Google, hey, I've got this link on my website, which I'm telling you that is relevant to my content that I'm sending users to. You actually want a really strong way of saying, I do not endorse this. Do not pass value. Do not associate me with this. So it's a really good way of saying, it's like a closed door on that link. And there's some nuance, like different search engines treat it different ways, and there's lots of experiment. It doesn't matter. Like, the principle is, I don't trust this, or I don't want to pass value through it.
But I think it's also fair to point out that this is a signal, right? Like, we can't fully trust that Google will or won't do that. And I think that's something that we tend to mistake a lot, where we feel canonical tags are similar, where we think, oh, it's okay, I put the canonical tag as this. But really, they're kind of sticky plasters. Like, Google can choose to do it or ignore it. So we just need to bear that in mind, and we can't rely on them 100%. Someone on the chat was asking about rel sponsored. So that's a fairly new, like a few years ago, right? And that's basically saying that there is some form of like advertisement or agreement behind that link, correct?
Yeah, it's the same as no follow. It's just a bit more specific to say, don't endorse this because it's an advert. And if you're linking to sponsored or affiliate stuff, it's in Google's guidelines that you have to use these to say, don't pass page rank, don't endorse this, don't benefit their pages by me linking to it. You need to kind of do that disclosure via these attributes.
Yeah, I actually have a follow-up question from Alicia Miller there, who asks, would this be good if you've got the same blog post featured on 2 different parts of your website? Difference in canonical versus no follow links?
Oh, that sounds messy. I guess we need to look at it to be sure, but typically you don't want the same content on 2 different pages, and that's quite a big oversimplification. But if this is the same blog post on 2 different URLs, that might be a problem. Now, you might use a canonical URL to kind of patch over that, but it sounds like there's something weird and deeper going on here.
Yeah,
Probably
I
wouldn't
think
want to be no following.
usually when you tend to see that happen is when someone has decided to post a Medium article, which I do not advise, and then go like, whoa, I own this article, so I should also put it on my website. Or even LinkedIn, for example. So they've posted like a post on LinkedIn, and then so I think this is usually when it happens. And people then go like, well, is this considered duplicate content? Which one is going to outrank the other, and so forth. So yeah, that usually happens then.
Yeah. And then Cedric in the chat asks, no follow doesn't work for internal links, does it?
Google will still follow it for discovery purposes, but they won't endorse it, so you can manage some of that. Yeah.
What does endorse mean in this regard?
I think endorse is like give it authority, right?
Yeah, so like there's I guess the simplest version of that is Google assigns a value to all pages on the internet as part of PageRank. There's a lot of time gone by since they started doing that, but they have some kind of way of measuring the value of a page. And you're saying, don't pass any of the value of this page to that page. And then there's also a question of context. If this page is about cats and that page is about dogs, probably don't want to be signaling that they're related and the same topic. So yeah, you can kind of lock that down. I think it's probably quite rare to be using these on internal links other than things like maybe facets, as you mentioned.
Yes, that's usually where I see it. So you have, I don't know, 100 different variations of filters on a page, and you don't want Google to end up following all that. Like, they're purely there for humans and users and user experience. So you would then end up like adding a whole bunch of no follows at that point.
Awesome. Okay, I'm definitely done with no follows now.
Love this. It's like a no follow webinar.
Yeah, right. We should do that.
And someone is specifically asking if we can manipulate our authority. We do not like to use the word manipulate as SEOs.
Yep.
I mean, we probably do tend to do that, but we do not choose to use that word ever.
And no, you can't. They locked all that down years ago.
Yeah. Okay. Actually, I think that was the last of the questions we have time for now. I'm gonna slide in a small CTA there.
Well done. Seamless,
wasn't it? It's like right down there. So yeah, I wanted to thank everyone for joining, and especially Areej for joining us on this webinar. Really, really lovely to have you. And a good chat about a lot of things, and especially no follow. And no, this was really good. I really enjoyed this myself as well. So I hope everyone else has as well. So the next webinar, which you can sign up for using the flashy CTA button I just magically made appear, is on August 30th with Nicola Stott. And she'll be talking about SEO strategy and how to zoom out, making sure you're going in the right direction with your SEO tactics. We've had her in our Yoast SEO podcast before, actually, so we're super happy she's back with us. So sign up for that as well. Areej, once again, thank you very, very much. Jono, thank you again for doing your usual awesomeness. And thanks everyone else for joining. And we will see you.
Thank you all.
Next month.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.